My name is Tom Kelly, and I'm a stand-up comedian, and I'm fixing up my life so you don't have to. Think of this as an inappropriate TED Talk. If Letterman had a baby with Oprah, you would have Tom Kelly. By the way, 3 people who will sue me for that last sentence one day. But I'm a stand-up comedian. You've seen me on The View, Good Morning America, Headline News, America's Got Talent, and a bunch of other shows. And this is the podcast where we take the existential crisis and turn it into a renaissance. New episodes guaranteed on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. If you don't see it pop up in your little podcast app, go to podcast.tomkellyshow.com. It will be there. And I'm across the board on social media as Tom Kelly Show. But right now, let's go from worst to first and start
the Tom Kelly Show. Everybody, I want you to go to the Tom Kelly Show. I want you all to know about the Tom Kelly Show. Thank you.
Trigger warning, spoiler alert, batten down the hatches, please fix my life. You're listening to episode 163 of the Tom Kelly Show. This is one where you might think there's a big guest, but no, I'm reviewing a film most of you will probably never, ever see. But it's the documentary Worst to First. It's a story about how Scott Shannon, who is now on a radio station, WCBS-FM, took Z100, which is a radio station so many New Yorkers of my generation grew up with, and took it from the worst in the market to the first in the market. He arguably is the pioneer of the morning zoo radio format, which is a format that I grew up with. And I hate to say it, but probably, if not him directly, it was really more Elvis Duran and a few other radio guys who had the Z100 Morning Zoo slot between Elvis Duran and Scott Shannon that were an influence in my career that, frankly, I don't talk about a lot. You know, you guys know me from the more glamorous work that I do, which just sound, like sometimes I feel like I'm the janitor at the really nice toilet factory. But yeah, you guys know me from warm-up work on TV shows and whatnot. And you've seen me in comedy clubs that are kind of beaten up. And, you know, people always ask, hey, Tom, what were your influences? And I always, lead with Johnny Carson and David Letterman. We talk about influences in my creative life. So I went to summer camp at Camp Horizon, which we'll talk about one another time. You guys who are longtime Tom Kelly Show podcast listeners have heard me talk to my friend Vince Kalura, who went to camp with me. And I would say 7th grade and 8th grade, I was a camper at this camp. And I would take the camp bus, which was either a 14-passenger van and then later a station wagon driven by my friend Dennis Tremelis. And we would listen to morning radio. And Stern was too edgy. And we would listen to the Z Morning Zoo. So Scott Shannon, he invented a format that we've all come to take a little bit for granted and maybe even nowadays consider hacky. You know, we all talk about, when we talk morning radio, we always talk about blah, 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 Howard Stern this, Howard Stern that. But we forget about how awesome radio was and how it really is a dying art form. One, it gets into your ears. It creates a sense of imagination. And 2, it was a very, very local format before these big companies like iHeartMedia, previously Clear Channel, and, Westwood One, and all these stations started, playing Pac-Man and gobbling up the little stations. And Scott Shannon was, at least on the top 40 stations, one, he's credited with really creating a cool top 40 format that has driven a lot of musical innovation. But he's also credited for, the shows where you have the little, the sound effects, And my favorite is the Wacky Horn there. like it was high energy, prank calls, phony phone calls, this, phony phone calls, that. Shock jock, let's hate on the other station kind of stuff. Stuff that I may not be good at, the negative energy thing. That's why I kind of gravitate to the Elvis Duran type of humor, because I gravitate to kindness over let me make fun of my opponents. So all of that said, 1989, summer of 89. God, what a summer that was. Indiana Jones, Star Trek V, Ghostbusters 2, and summer camp. And if I'm wrong on the year, don't correct me, but those are the movies and the memories I associate with that year. And we would listen to in the bus, the station wagon. God, it was the last of the family trucksters. It had the wood paneling, I believe, too. It was a station wagon. And we would listen to the Z Morning Zoo on the way up. And you'd listen to, I believe it was Elvis Duran and the 5 o'clock whistle on the way back. And once a year, Z100 would have their birthday show. And I would take my cassette recorder and record their birthday show, because that had their best comedy bits. Flash forward to, I meet my best friend, Mike McGarrigle, and I come up with the idea of taking a cassette tape recorder and recording our own wacky morning shows on an imaginary station called WKNM. I believe it was the Mike and Tom show on WKNM. And it was fun. And I often wonder, if I were born in the age of YouTube, if I were born in the age of podcasting, would I have gone viral at a young age? Like I have joked with my friend Steve Berger that I have failed in every form of media since the printing press. But all joking aside, Mike and I did at times a very funny cassette recorded radio show. And I would listen to these Z100 bits. If I couldn't get the FM station to come in clear on the short bus I took to school, I would just play the one tape I had of the best of Z100's bits. One thing to learn about me creatively, in the days before the Amazon A-word, Apple Music, Spotify, blah, 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 I was too cheap to buy music. I loved listening to the radio, but I was too cheap to buy tapes. So I made these WKNM mixtapes with Mike. And honestly, listening to the sound of my own voice was soothing. And listening to the sound of my own voice was a great way for me to steal Mike McGarrigle's music collection. There you go. So, and by the way, were there podcasting back then? I wonder, would Mike and I have been viral 14-year-olds? Or would I have done something to get myself canceled and kicked out of high school at a ripe young age? So this documentary, Worst to First, it's one of those straight to YouTube, straight to streaming documentaries. If you are a radio nerd, I recommend, if you grew up in New York and you loved the radio, I recommend this documentary. It is a must watch for people who are listening to this show, looking for some sort of inspiration to do something creative. It reminds you of like the WKRP in Cincinnati sort of stereotype of they're in a dirty studio, direct connection with listeners. The listeners didn't know most of the DJs were unattractive, And what I loved about the documentary, and again, it's a 60-minute watch. You could probably have it on in the background. I liked watching it because it was a reminder of commercials that you can't find on YouTube. Like a lot of 1984 nostalgia. By the way, I overpronounce nostalgia lately. Have you noticed that? Nostalgia. But I go nostalgia. Nostalgia. And it has a lot of that nostalgia. And it was what I liked about Worst to First is it was a challenge to be original. Something I have been trying to do for about a year and a half now on this podcast. The folks in those days found their own way of being original, and they became the one that people were copying. as we start getting, he went to war with a competitor. That's not me. They did radio contests. I had another clip queued up. I don't know if it's worth playing. Let's see here. Oh, here's what I like what he did. Let's play this clip.
We are going to build a great radio station, and I'm talking to you, the listeners. You have to get on board and help us.
He recruited the audience to build our audience.
That's a genius.
Scott said, send in your name and the name of 25 of your friends that you have turned on to Z100.
Let people know that the station is on. Take out an old sheet, get a magic marker, write Z100 on it, and hang it out your window in Brooklyn, the Bronx, Staten Island, Long Island, wherever you are. We need your help.
Z100, New York.
So what I love about that clip, it inspired me to go backwards with my promotions. Right now, I think the Facebook algorithm hates me. I'm recording today, February 13th. It is Super Bowl week, or the week after the Super Bowl. And I'm only just now seeing my friends' Facebook thoughts about Super Bowl commercials 4 days later. Facebook as a form of me making my money is over. Instagram lets me sing to the same 100 people over and over again. Fine, useful. Email lists, honestly, my open rate is 30% on that. And what Scott Shannon and those folks in the 1980s did, they were original. Bumper stickers, T-shirts, and you hope that people would see the T-shirt for your station and then just listen to it on the way home. Now, you also had 7 choices for automobile entertainment back then, if that many. I'm competing against millions of podcasts. In fact, I know for a fact, many of you listening have a podcast of your own. So for those of you watching on YouTube, you can see this. I did this with this show again back in the day when I had my first podcast with Mike McGarrigle and Andrew Garcia and John McCann. I did grocery store flyers. I don't know if I got myself a single listener from any of it, but I made a flyer, a vague flyer, which also was crowdsourced. And special thanks to Fred the Mailman, Steve Berger, and Jacob Lee Downey, and Lindsey Bray for giving me advice on this. But I made a flyer that I will let you guys print out. If you want, email me, TomKellyShow@me.com. Find me however you find me. And I would love it if you print these flyers out. And they say, self-help comedy podcast seeking listeners. Turn the existential crisis into a renaissance. Laugh along the way. A little logo for Tom Kelly Show, and then QR codes to listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, my own website, and YouTube. And then at the bottom, I made these little garage sale tags. If you listen, you could hear the scissors. Little ASMR for you. That say TomKellyShow.com and @TomKellyShow. So that way people can rip the little reminder and maybe they can listen to the show. Because here's the deal. I'm not saying this is the gimmick of the week. Last week, the gimmick was annoy Jennifer Garner. The other gimmick was annoy Jessica Curson, who is just very busy and I'm having trouble scheduling on the podcast. So one of those two gimmicks worked. This week's gimmick, hang up a Tom. If you feel so inclined, I'm asking you to hang up Tom Kelly Show podcast signs wherever the hell you think people are sitting and looking at them. Maybe they'll come in, maybe they won't. Let's be original. People, there you go. Let's be original. Now, I don't think this sign is necessarily my gateway to a sitcom, but it's something fun to do. Would I make Tom Kelly Show bumper stickers? When was the last time anybody put a bumper sticker on their car? Bumper stickers were Facebook statuses of the 1980s. If you see somebody with a bumper sticker on their car now, 1, it's probably someone who's driving a cheap car. 2, it's probably somebody who is insane. And 3, they're generally political. And 4, I think nowadays on these modern cars, a bumper sticker would screw up your backup sensors. And Steve Berger and I were talking this afternoon about what is my gimmick for the Tom Kelly Show. The gimmick is fix my life, people. Fix my life. And maybe you can fix yours too. And I don't want to make it a poor me podcast, though. I do want to make it a fix my life podcast. I set up what I'm going to call the Tom Kelly Show Secret Fan Club. It'll be something like that. It's it's a Facebook group. There are benefits to having a Facebook group versus my fan page. The Facebook group is so you guys can make friends with each other. I have talked about this before. My friend Amy, if you're listening, Amy Lachlan, another shout out for our friend Father Lou. Father Lou was my college priest, and I will do a long show about him one day. But Father Lou was all about setting people up on friend dates. Father Lou had a friend named Joe Sledge, who was a great guy, blah, 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 who cares? And Father Lou was almost pushy about me becoming friends with Joe Sledge. And Joe Sledge is one of my very good friends in my life now. Father Lou was right. You know, I'm going to make the group private so that way you guys can have open discussions about the deep things we're talking about here. And just do me a favor, be nice to each other. Don't slide into each other's DMs and be creepy. I'm pretty sure the average age of the fan group right now is 35, so we should be safe. But there you go. And I had a list of just silly things I wanted to learn from the documentary. Use your listeners to get listeners. So guys, yeah, do me a favor. Let's use the Scott Shannon thing. 25 is kind of aggressive, but if you could tell 5 friends about the Tom Kelly Show, 5 friends who you think would like it, if you could do that for me, I'd consider that a favor. And do what I do at the end of a comedy show. Open their phone and hit subscribe for them. Maybe they'll listen, maybe they won't. Just random thoughts I put in my little thought diary. I'm actually reading from paper right now. What makes my podcast better and different? So what's, using the Scott Shannon challenge to be different. What makes me different? I actually care about my listeners. I actually hope you guys grow from listening to this. I am your friend in the trenches. I'm also the friend you don't have to call because I have the podcast. I have a stand-up joke under this. I'm a 5 who thinks he's a 3. We'll explore that down the road. I also have another joke here. My yoga teacher uses more props than Carrot Top. Oh, here we go. I'm in the friendship business. That's an Elvis Duran quote. Elvis didn't say it in that documentary. He said it on Eric Nagel's podcast a couple of days ago. I am in the friendship business, and that's what I'm at the point of here. At this point, people, I'm funny. Am I the funniest guy you know? No, but I am the best human being who is also funny that you know. Instead of comedy fans, I'm forming a cult. I'm starting a religion. Geez, this is a powerful thought. I want you, the Tom Kelly Show listener, to join my comedic self-improvement cult. I want you to be more crazy than a new born-again Christian. Now, I'm not knocking born-again Christians. I'm not knocking Christians. But you ever meet like just somebody who acts like they're the first person in 2,000 years to discover the message of a religion? Yeah, I want you to be like that about the Tom Kelly Show podcast and this little thing that we are starting together. So, and I'll end on a funny side story. So there was a girl who just checked off every box in somebody I wanted to date. We kept matching on dating websites, but she kind of lived far away and she was traveling for work, but she checked off all of my crazy boxes. She was pretty, she was athletic, she was smart, she was fun, and God bless her. I think after 5 years of matching every now and again on Match.com, she says, "Hey, Tom, I live in New Jersey now. Why don't we get together?" Actually, I probably said, "Hey, I see you live in New Jersey now. Why don't we get together?" And she said, yes. So I drive to wherever she is in Jersey, and she was a little bit further away than I thought she was. And we get there, and I think I'm going on a date, and I am going to score. And it turns out she is on a coffee date trying to save my soul. Now, again, I've told the stand-up jokes before. I go to church. I go to Catholic Mass enough. And she wasn't just Christian. She was like that kind of Christian that Chick-fil-A supports that makes us not allowed to eat Chick-fil-A sandwiches. She was in that particular she worked for one of the charities that Chick-fil-A supported and then made Chick-fil-A sandwiches less tasty. And again, she just kept talking Jesus. And I'm like, and you're going to make me convert to Judaism if you keep talking about this, and then at a certain point, we stayed in touch by texting and stuff for a while. And I started to try to convert her out of that particular Christian group she was in. So she's like, Tom, I've been saved by this church. And I'm like, yes, I'm trying to save you from being saved. There you go. So what are the asks, people? If you are so inclined, ask for the Tom Kelly Show private group link and I will send it to you. Also, if you are inclined, the Tom Kelly Show grocery store sign, hang it in your apartment building, hang it in your school, hang it in your workplace, hang it, on any bulletin board you see where people might listen to podcasts, and you could just print it out yourself. Ask me, TomKellyShow@me.com, and I'll send you the link. Magic Mirror Time. I see Mistral in Orlando. I see Matt Mariani. I see Daniela in Italy. I see Ann the opera singer. I see Jacob Lee Downey. I see Laney. I see Melzel. I see Vicky with 2 Ks. I see Josh in California. And I see Phil. And if I didn't say your name, of course, I see you. Thank you guys for making this podcast a fun experience for me. New shows Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. And until next time, which is tomorrow. Good night, New York.